Hi everyone, it's Tox from critshappen.com. Thanks for watching and welcome back. Today I have a critical review of Android Netrunner, the living card game from Fantasy Flight Games. Now if you're not familiar, living card games basically mean if I buy this box and you buy this box, we get the exact same set of cards. If you buy an expansion pack known as a data pack and I buy the same expansion pack, then we both know we're going to have access to the same cards. So it completely eliminates the idea of chasing and having to hunt down and pay a lot of extra money for specific cards, which is really nice. Now this is not the first living card game Fantasy Flight has produced. They have many others like Lord of the Rings, in the Cthulhu universe, they've got stuff from Warhammer Invasion, Star Wars is coming out, so a lot of great licenses. And Android is one that has seen other games inside of Fantasy Flight as well, from the appropriately named Android, and Infiltration and other things like that. How does this one hold up? How does it stack up in the living card game genre? Well, it did just win the Golden Geek Award for Best Card Game of the Year, so somebody has to like it. The question is, do I? The first thing you need to know about Netrunner, when you buy the main box, you get 4 corporations and you get 3 runners. The game is played in a 2-player setup where one person is a corporation and the other person is a runner. Both the game setup, the turns and the actions per turn, and the victory conditions for each player is completely different, which means it's a completely asymmetrical game. How you play as the corporation is going to be completely different as to how I play as a runner and vice versa. And it's one of the things that has really brought a lot of attention onto Netrunner. This is unlike any card game you've probably ever played before. It's definitely unlike any card game I've played before. But is it good? Well, come with me. Let's jump into the Android universe. Let's strap on all of our cyberpunk gear and see what it's like to be an evil corporation or a rogue runner trying to achieve victory in Netrunner. Now, in the base set of Netrunner, you're going to get 3 different runner decks and 4 different corporation decks. You're going to get the Jinteki, the Haas Biodroid, the Wayland Consortium, and NBN. And every one of those corporations feels completely different. Some are fast, some are quick, drawing cards, some are plotting and bluffing, and some are very strong and powerful and defensive. Then you have 3 different runners between Mac, Noise, and Gabriel. And again, each one of those are very, very different. Some are really good with certain programs, some are really good with certain hardware. In addition, you get generic cards that can go into any deck. There are specific rules for deck building when you're customizing decks, but we won't go ahead and get into that. For right now, the way they recommend to start a game is by taking one of the runner decks with the available generic cards, plus one of the corporation decks and their generic cards, shuffling them up and being able to start a game. Now the sides are very, very different. So I'll take a second, I'll show you what it looks like first from the corporation and how they put out the things that they need to win the game and what it is they need to do to win the game, and then we'll show you a little bit about the runners as well. In addition, you get what's called click trackers and a card that shows you the actions for each one, and as you may notice, the corporation has 3 clicks, whereas the runner has 4, so you're already starting to see some of the differences in the asymmetrical stuff. And then of course you get a bunch of the standard Fantasy Flight tokens to let you keep track of different things throughout the game. But let's go ahead and take a look at what the corporation setup looks like, what it is they need to do to win, and what it is they need to do to bluff the runners and get them to go somewhere else. So when you start the game as the corporation, you're going to start with your corporation identity card, which is your HQ. You're going to have your deck, which is your research and development. And over the course of the game, you're going to have cards in your discard pile, which is known as your archives. So again, you can see the terminology may seem confusing at first, but once you realize archives, discard, R&D, deck, HQ, me, starts to make some sense. What happens over the course of a corporation's turn is they're going to use agendas. And agendas have an advancement value and a score value. So this one will give you 2 points. They will have different card effects for when they're scored or when they're flipped over. But what you do is you pay a click or your actions per turn. And again, the corporation has 3 actions. And you get to install, which basically means play face down and create a remote server with that agenda. Now that sounds really confusing. Installing a card, that's an agenda to create a remote server. Essentially what I've done is I've taken a card from my hand, I've put it into play face down, and it's an ally that I need to score to get points and win the game. The first person to get 7 points, either by advancing them and scoring them as a corporation, or running against them and scoring them as a runner, we'll explain that in the runner section, will win the game at 7 points. Additionally, if the corporation can never draw a card and they run out of cards from their R&D, they will also lose the game. There's another victory condition, but we'll talk about that when we get into the runner as well. Now, once I've installed that server, it's not a good idea to leave it unprotected. So I can do things like upgrades. Upgrades are cards that go either in the root of your primary server, your HQ, or into an already installed remote server. And again, installed just means it's played face down and put into play. Now that still doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be protected. So in addition, there are cards called ice. Ice are actually put face down horizontally instead of vertically and placed in front of a server. And I can place them in front of a remote server, my HQ, which is me, my R&D, which is my deck, or my archives, which is my discard pile. Anyone can have a piece of ice, and they can have more than one piece of ice. The more ice you have, the more defenses you have. The more upgrades you have, the more defenses you have. But in addition, there's cards called assets. Assets are similar to agendas, but they're much more fun. So for example, this one says Ghost Branch. It costs 0 to flip over when someone encounters it. And it says Ghost Branch can be advanced. So as it doesn't have an advancement token here, or advancement value here, and our agenda did have an advancement value, I can still advance it, but there's not going to be a threshold. If I hit 3 advancement tokens on that remote server, I score it and I get the value of it. But this one just lets me add tokens to it. Why would I do that? Well, here's why. When the runner accesses Ghost Branch, you may give the runner 1 tag for each advancement token on Ghost Branch. And tags allow you to trace the runner, hunt them down, and do damage to them. Now I can install that in its own remote server. The advantage to that is, let's say that I paid an action and the right amount of money to put an advancement token on there. That looks like an agenda. It looks to the runner as though they may want to go after that and try and run and score it. But this is where the bluffing comes in. You can use your ice to make things look like a protected agenda, or you can leave them open to make people think you just haven't had a chance to protect it yet. There's a lot of different things and nuances that come into how you play your cards, when you play your cards, to push people as runners in the direction you want them to and pull them away from the directions you don't want them near. This just gives you a little basic idea of the complexities of Netrunner, but when you break it down to the bare simplicity, you have your discard pile, your draw pile, the card that represents you, allies and things that you're going to need to score to get points and win, and protection to cover your allies and your assets. Once you've got things like that down, it really is not too hard to play the corporation. And like I said, one of the really nice things about this is there's 4 different corporations, and all 4 of them feel very, very different. Let's take a look now at the runner, see how their setup is different, and some of the things that they use to make runs against these remote servers, against our HQ, R&D, and archives, and how they're going to try and steal our agendas to get points and win the game. So here we see a runner mid-game to late game. The runner has a completely different setup. They too have an action card that explains all the actions that they can take. They have a click tracker, which has 4 clicks instead of 3 clicks, so they have a little bit different round and different types of things that they can do. They have what's called their heap, which is their discard pile, their stack, which is their deck, and then their identity card, which represents themselves. But unlike the corporation, who has remote servers, what the runner has is a thing called the rig. The rig is made up of 3 rows, and there are some limitations, but we'll get into that in a second. But essentially, the top row is your program row, the second row is your hardware row, and the third row is your resource row. And you're going to need all different types of cards to be able to go against the different types of ice and protections that the corporation's going to have out. Now, each runner starts with a base amount of memory, and you need to have that memory to install programs. You'll see that programs will have a little memory item icon right here. It says 1. So while this will cost 3 credits to play, it'll also take up 1 of my memory. There are some cards that will give you more memory as well. Now, why do I need programs? Well, when I encounter a piece of ice, you'll remember it had strength on it. The ice has a little number in the corner here saying how much strength it is. The programs also will have strength. You need to have the same or greater strength on your program that you're interfacing with that piece of ice on to interact with it. That doesn't mean to beat it, it just means to interact with it. So if I am a runner and I'm using this piece of programming as a 1, going up against a piece of ice that's 3, I'm gonna lose. Think of it like attack and defense. If I have 1 attack and the ice has 3 defense, I'm not gonna get through it. If I have 3 attack and it has 3 defense, I'm gonna be able to possibly get through it. But it doesn't just mean that equal or greater wins. By interacting, you then have the chance to break subroutines. And on the ice, I'll bring out one of the corporation ones that we were using before. You'll see that this one has a strength of 3 and has a subroutine called End the Run, which basically means as a barrier type of ice, if I can't break that subroutine, my run is going to be over. And since it's a barrier, I have to have something that says stop a barrier. Well, the first 2 programs that this runner has out say break a sentry subroutine or break a code gate subroutine. Nothing about barriers. So even if I had the ability to pump up my strength of either of my programs, I wouldn't be able to get by that type of piece of ice. Now, additionally, there's hardware, which will give you different bonus attributes, like +1 link, for example, which will help you when the corporation is trying to trace you, and +1 or +2 memory, being able to allow you to install more programs. Resources are usually things that will give you in-game benefits by doing some type of triggered action. So for example, Aesop's Pawn Shop says when your turn begins, you may trash another of your installed cards to gain 3 credits. So that's a nice way of being able to add more money to your supply and being able to pay for the costs to come out. Because you can see the toolbox costs 9 credits. This is a completely different setup, and it's very interesting because while your opponent, as the corporation, is playing cards face down, all of your cards in the rig come out face up. So it's almost as though the corporation knows what's coming at times when the runs are going to happen against them. But that said, the runner cards, even in the base set, are really, really powerful and really, really strong. In my personal opinion, it's a little easier to play the runner the first time you play the game. It's not quite as bluffing and setting up those bluffs. It's really about building up your attack or your strength from your programs and being able to make those runs and as many runs as possible. But it is very different. The terminology is very different. While the deck here is called the stack, the deck for the corporation is called R&D. So there's a lot of different terminology and taxonomy names that you have to get used to. And the layout is completely different as well, having your rig over here with 3 separate rows for your programs, hardware, and resources. But that said, again, once you get used to the fact of this is my discard pile, this is my deck, this is me, these are the things I'm attacking with, this is what's going to improve my ability to attack, and this is what's going to help me throughout the game, it gets pretty easy. It is a very interesting game to pick up because of all the taxonomy, but a couple of games in, and I assure you, you'll be having a good time with Netrunner, understanding the terminology as it relates to normal everyday game terms. Okay, so we have a two-player game set up with one player playing Mac and one player playing the NBN. I'm going to start off with the corporation's turn. Now the corporation already has a remote server with an advancement token on it and a piece of ice protecting that server. The first thing I'm going to do is take my draw phase. The corporation actually gets to draw a card. At the beginning of the runner's turn, they do not. I will then look at my cards and see what I can do and what I can't do. And I'm going to decide to I will spend one of my clicks or an action to install an asset, agenda, upgrade, or piece of ice. And I will install this card face down here. This creates another remote server, and it could be an agenda or it could be a trap. I don't know. I know. My opponent doesn't know, but that's part of the game, is the bluffing of, if the runner gets to this agenda and scores that agenda points, works out great for them. If I get to that agenda and score that agenda by advancing it, it works out great for me. So in addition, I will then take another click or another action, and I will install a piece of ice. So I will go ahead and install that here. Now you notice I'm not paying any of my credits. One of the interesting things about playing the corporation side is you don't pay your credits until you flip them up face up after someone has made a run against that server. Now, this makes playing the corporation very, very tricky, because you have to be able to spend your credits to do what you want to do, but make sure you have credits to flip ice over and things like that, and assets and stuff to help you out. So for my last one, I'm going to go ahead and spend my last click to draw a card from R&D, which is my deck. So I'll have my 4 cards in my hand. I will leave my turn like this, and I've installed a remote server, and by install I mean place it face down into the game area. I've installed a piece of ice to protect that server. Ice is always installed horizontally, and servers are always installed vertically so that the runners know exactly what they're dealing with. Now, what the runner knows right now is I have 2 remote servers along with my R&D and my archives. I have a piece of ice in front of both of my servers here, but nothing protecting my archives or my R&D. Now the R&D, while it's your deck, does represent a server, and someone could make a run on it, as it does with your discard pile. But right now the runner may think this is an agenda because I have agenda advancement token on here. The trick is that some assets allow you to advance them. And advancing is a corporation action where you would pay a credit to advance a card and put an advancement token on it. So if this is not an agenda and it's an asset, I could be bluffing, putting that agenda token, advancement token on there, making the runner think that that is an agenda to go after. So that's the end of the corporation's turn. Let's take a look at what the runner's going to do. Okay, so the runner has 4 cards in their hand and no credits available to them. Now, the challenge here is there are some cards that you can play from your hand to make runs, but they'll cost you credits. Or you can make a run as a click or as an action. So I think the first thing that the runner is going to do, because they really want to understand what's in front of them, is they're going to go ahead and play this card, Infiltration. Infiltration is an event, and as we talked about between events and operations are corporation cards, events are one-time things that happen. There's no credit cost, so I don't have to pay for it. And I can either gain 2 credits or I can expose 1 card. And I'm going to expose this card so that I know as a runner, should I make a run against this server or not. By exposing, I flip it face up, and I see that it is breaking news and it is an agenda. And it's worth 1 agenda point. So they have already got 1 agenda token on here, And I need to get in there to make sure that I get a hold of that agenda and they don't score it first. So this will go into my heap as it's an event. It happens once. And then we move on to the rest of my actions. I'll put my click token here for my first click, and I have 3 remaining clicks. Oh, in addition, by exposing this, you only flip it over so you see it, and then you flip it back over. Now, breaking news has 2 points for advancement, and 1 is already on there. So if he were to get that, he's going to second advancement, then he's going to end up hitting the advancement point and being able to score the agenda. Now, agendas, when they're scored or stolen, in the case of a runner making a run against them, will do different things. As an example, breaking news says, when you score breaking news, give the runner 2 tags. When the turn on which you scored breaking news ends, the runner loses 2 tags. Now, tagging is all about tracing and being able to discard cards from the runner's hand and being able to do net damage to them. And as they take damage, they could take brain damage as well. And brain damage, if they hit a certain point, they're going to lose and die. So there are a couple of different additional ways that a corporation could beat the runner. But being very honest, it's very hard to beat them by doing brain damage to them and knocking them out that way. It is possible. It's not impossible or improbable. It's just very challenging to do that right now with just the base set. So now as a runner, I know with my 3 remaining clicks, that's a server I want to make a run against. But I also know that this is a piece of ice protecting it, and I don't know what it could be. So what do I have in front of me right now? I have a program called Pipeline, and it's an icebreaker for the killer type. And it says I can spend 1 credit to break a sentry subroutine, or 2 credits to give +1 strength for the remainder of the run. Now when you encounter a piece of ice, you're going to have strength equal to or greater to the ice's strength to be able to try and break subroutines. And I know some of this terminology may be losing people, but we'll get there, so stick with me. In addition, I have a hardware modification on here as well. And it says to install Personal Touch, the name of this card, only on an icebreaker, which is what this program is. The host icebreaker has +1 strength. So right now, my program Pipeline has 2 strength, which is okay. It's not phenomenal, but it's okay. Now, I'm not sure what I want to do quite yet, because I could get in some deep trouble here if things don't work out well. So, let's see. I've played an event. I have 3 actions left. Why don't we make a run? I'm going to declare with my next action or my next click to make a run on this server. So when you make a run, you have to encounter from the furthest most out card in 1 by 1 and deal with each card. So the first thing that's going to happen is the corporation is going to have the option of flipping this card up and encountering it. When my runner comes in to encounter it, the corporation could choose not to flip it up and have them encounter it and let them buy. But in this case, that would be bad because I know from flipping this over, it's already an agenda. And I'm going to want to make sure as a corporation player that this thing stops them. So I will go ahead and flip this face up, and you'll see that it is a wall of static. So the wall of static costs me 3. So I'll have to spend those 3 credits and play that face up. You'll also notice that it has a strength of 3, which right now means that with my programs, I only have a strength of 2. At this point, I would end up encountering the subroutine because there's no way to stop it. And the subroutine is this little arrow and it says end the run. I'm hosed, I don't get in to that server and I don't get that agenda, which means on my opponent's turn, they're probably going to go ahead and get in there and immediately advance that agenda and score it. So that's Netrunner in a giant cyberpunk nutshell. There's a lot to this game. I'm not going to lie to you. This is not a pick up and dive in game. You've got to read the rules. You've got to reread the rules. Even if you are technically minded, I highly suggest to reread the rules again. Now that said, the challenge, at least for me, was making the connections. And by that, I mean being able to look at all of the different terms and taxonomy that they use in the rulebook and equating them to what my dumb gamer brain knows them as. So, what is R&D? It's my deck. What is my stack? It's my deck. What's my trash? It's my discard pile. Once I was able to make all of those correlations, it was easy. This is actually, once you have that parallel down, a really easy game to understand and a really easy game to play. It is extremely fun having different sides interacting. Being able to sit down at a table, play a game where you have one completely different setup than I do, and know that it's not just going to be the same decks against each other, and not just who can draw the best cards, but really come down to skill based on the decks that you can put together from the cards available, which is another reason why being a living card game is really good for this type of game, makes it really, really unique and really, really engaging. It's a lot of fun to sit across from somebody, whether they're playing the runner or whether they're playing the corporations, and keep track of what it is they're doing with all of their clicks and all their actions to plan what you're going to do on your turn. It is a lot of bluffing. There is a lot of bluffing in this game, between what servers you're going to make a run on as a runner to how you're going to set up your remote servers as the corporation to entice people to go after the ones that you want them to and leave alone the ones you don't want them going after. It is a lot of fun when you get that one moment of, I have set up the perfect bait and trap as a corporation, and the runner goes to the completely different place that you wanted them to, but you still have to have the right ice and the right defenses to stop them. It's very high action, it's very tense. That bluffing adds even more tension to it, and it's a blast when you can flip over that one piece of ice that you know is going to stop the runner. And it's even more of a blast when, as the runner, you can break through that ice and get to the agendas and score those points. Overall, in my opinion, this is the best living card game that Fantasy Flight has produced to date. I know a lot of people love The Lord of the Rings, and it is a very good card game, but this is without a doubt the most unique, the most engaging, the most fun, and in my opinion, the most or the best use of a license with an Android type universe into a card game and bringing out the feeling of being a corporation or being a runner and going at it. It is hands down a crit, if not one of the 5 best games that I have played this year. Extremely fun, extremely good artwork, extremely engaging, and more importantly than anything, it is a great experience sitting at the table on either side. And when you lose, you want to jump right back in. It is so amazing how you can get steamrolled in some games if you're not paying attention right, and you just want to jump right back in, you want to reshuffle your cards and go right at it. And that's the mark of a really good game. The other thing I want to note, I've introduced this to several friends who have no technical background whatsoever. They wouldn't understand what a remote program on a server is in real life if I paid them to. But they got this. And once you make those equations and those parallels to tell them, hey, this is called R&D, but just think of it as your deck. This is called this, but just think of it as this. Once they get that down, they pick it up really easy. Okay, I need to install servers, I need to bluff you over here, I need to protect over here, go, let's fire it up. It's amazing how quickly people who aren't technical minded have picked this up. Now, a couple people have told me that because they weren't fans of science fiction, it did kind of drain off of them after a couple of gameplays, so it may not be for everyone. But if you like engaging games, if you like games that are unique, and provide you with a new experience that you may never have had before, I really highly recommend you to check out Android Netrunner. I have had an absolute blast playing it. I will probably have a lot more blast playing it, and I will probably continue to get my butt kicked because I am not very good at this. But it's a fun game, and it's going to get better and better as more data packs come available. So, we hope you've enjoyed this. We definitely give it a crit, but we'd love to hear your thoughts as well. Feel free to leave your comments here on the YouTube channel. You can find us, of course, on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Google+, and at our homepage at critshappen.com. But until we see you next time, thank you so much for watching. We hope you enjoy your time in the Android universe, making runs and protecting your servers, but keep rolling those dice, and we hope they're all crits.